Imagine hosting the celebration of a lifetime at your own mansion, a lakefront property you worked decades to afford, only to have strangers storm through your front door, screaming that you don't belong there. Marcus Johnson thought his 50th birthday would be unforgettable for all the right reasons. Instead, it became a battlefield. An HOA board member named Patricia Sullivan didn't just question whether he lived there. She invaded his home in front of 100 guests, called the police, and tried to have him arrested at his own party. But what she didn't know was that Marcus had cameras everywhere, a lawyer on speed dial, and zero tolerance for racism disguised as neighborhood concern. By the end of this story, Patricia and her accomplices would pay $100,000 each. But the real question is, how did a birthday celebration turn into a $500,000 lawsuit, and what did those cameras capture that changed everything?
Marcus Johnson wasn't supposed to make it. Born in a neighborhood where gunshots were more common than graduation announcements, Marcus learned early that the world wasn't designed for people who looked like him to succeed. His mother cleaned houses for wealthy families across town, and his father worked double shifts at a warehouse until his body gave out. They never owned property, they never had savings, but they had dreams they poured into their son. Marcus studied like his life depended on it, because it did. Full scholarship to State University, engineering degree, first job at a tech firm where he was the only black face in every meeting. He smiled through the microaggressions, the assumptions that he was the intern, that surprised comments when his projects exceeded expectations. He kept his head down and his ambition up. 25 years later, Marcus was a senior VP at one of the largest tech companies in the state. He'd earned it. Every promotion, every accolade, every dollar. And finally, at age 49, he bought his dream home. A stunning stone mansion on the shores of Lake Vista, a gated community known for its exclusivity and breathtaking waterfront properties. 5 bedrooms, chef kitchen, private dock, panoramic windows overlooking water that sparkled like diamonds under the sun. It cost $2.3 million. He paid cash. His mother cried when she saw it. His father, gone for 10 years by then, would have been speechless. Marcus loved that house. He loved waking up to sunrise over the water, loved the quiet dignity of a space that was entirely his. For the first time in his life, he felt like he'd arrived, not just financially, but emotionally. He'd earned his place at the table. The neighbors, however, had other ideas. From the day he moved in, Marcus noticed the stares, the way conversations stopped when he walked past, the HOA meetings where Patricia Sullivan, the board president, would smile tightly and ask pointed questions about his employment situation and whether he understood the community standards. He'd ignored it mostly. He knew what it was. He'd dealt with worse. But Marcus was also strategic. He installed a state-of-the-art security system with cameras covering every angle of his property: front door, backyard, driveway, dock. Not because he was paranoid, because he was black, successful, and living in a space where people like him weren't supposed to be. He knew how this story could go. His 50th birthday was supposed to be a celebration of everything he'd overcome. He invited friends, family, colleagues, over 100 people. He hired caterers, a live band, rented elegant outdoor furniture for the lakefront lawn. It was going to be perfect. He had no idea it would become a crime scene.
The party started at 6 p.m. on a warm Saturday evening in July. The sun hung low over Lake Vista, casting golden light across the water. Marcus stood on his back deck in a tailored linen suit, greeting guests with hugs and laughter. Music drifted through the air. The smell of grilled seafood and spices filled the summer breeze. Everything was perfect, until Patricia Sullivan showed up. Marcus first noticed her standing at the edge of his property line, arms crossed, face twisted in disapproval. She wasn't on the guest list. She wasn't invited, but there she was, staring at his home like it was a crime scene. He waved politely, trying to defuse whatever issue was brewing. She didn't wave back. 20 minutes later, she returned, this time with 3 other HOA board members. They marched up his driveway like a military unit, past the valet, past the decorations, straight toward his front door. Marcus intercepted them on the stone steps leading to the entrance. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone measured but firm. Patricia's eyes scanned the crowd of guests, mostly black and brown faces, laughing, dancing, celebrating. Her lips curled into something between a sneer and a smile. "We've received complaints," she said loudly, projecting her voice so nearby guests could hear. "On noise, about unauthorized gatherings, and about people who don't belong here." Marcus's jaw tightened. "This is my home. These are my guests, and I filed the proper event permits with the HOA 2 weeks ago." Patricia ignored him. She pushed past, stepping directly into his foyer. "Excuse me," Marcus started, but she was already inside, flanked by the other HOA board members. They moved through his home like inspectors, peering into rooms, whispering to each other, taking photos with their phones. Guests stopped talking. The music seemed to dim. Everyone was watching now. "You can't just walk into my house," he said, his voice rising despite his efforts to stay calm. His hand shook, not from fear, but from rage he'd spent a lifetime suppressing. Patricia turned to face him, her expression dripping with condescension. "Actually, as HOA President, I have the authority to inspect properties during community disturbances. And this," she gestured around at the black and brown faces staring at her in disbelief, "this is definitely a disturbance." One of Marcus's cousins, a lawyer named Janelle, stepped forward. "You need to leave now, or we're calling the police." Patricia smirked. "Oh, don't worry, I already did." The words landed like a bomb. Within minutes, 2 police cars pulled into the driveway, lights flashing. Officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts, surveying the scene with the kind of casual authority that made Marcus's stomach drop. He'd been here before, not literally, but emotionally. Every black man in America knows this moment. The moment when you're guilty until proven innocent. The moment when your own home isn't protection enough. Patricia met the officers at the door, speaking in hushed, urgent tones, gesturing toward Marcus and his guests. He couldn't hear the exact words, but he caught fragments: trespassing, suspicious activity, doesn't belong. One officer approached Marcus. "Sir, we need to see some identification and proof of residence." Marcus felt 100 pairs of eyes on him. His mother, standing near the kitchen, looked stricken. His friends, successful professionals, doctors, engineers, stood frozen, helpless. He pulled out his driver's license, his hands trembling with humiliation. "This is my house. I own it. This woman broke in without permission." The officer barely glanced at the ID. "Do you have a deed? Mortgage papers?" "It's inside, but she's the one who—" "Just get the documents, sir." Marcus walked inside, shame burning through him like acid. This was his home, his sanctuary, and he was being treated like a criminal in front of everyone who mattered to him. He returned with a folder containing his deed, mortgage payoff statement, and HOA permits. He handed them over silently, watching the officer flip through them with agonizing slowness. Finally, the officer nodded. "Everything checks out." Patricia's face flushed red. "Well, there must be some." "Ma'am, he owns the property. You need to leave." But the damage was done. The party was over. Guests shuffled toward their cars, embarrassed, angry, unsure what to say. Marcus stood on his front steps, watching his 50th birthday celebration dissolve into whispers and pity. Patricia and her crew left without apology, without acknowledgement, just smug satisfaction that they'd made their point.
You don't belong here. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that every second had been recorded, every word, every invasion, every humiliation. And Marcus Johnson was done playing defense.
The next morning, Marcus sat in his living room, replaying the security footage on his laptop. His hands were steady now, his mind sharp. The rage had crystallized into something more powerful: purpose. He watched Patricia storm through his front door without permission, watched her rifle through his home, taking photos, making comments, watched her lie to the police, painting him as a threat in his own house, watched the officers treat him like a suspect while his guests, his family, stood paralyzed by fear and humiliation. He watched his mother's face crumble. That was the part that broke him. Marcus called Janelle. "I want to sue. All of them." Janelle didn't hesitate. "I was hoping you'd say that." They filed a federal lawsuit against Patricia Sullivan and the 3 HOA board members who'd accompanied her, $100,000 each for violating his civil rights, trespassing, defamation, and emotional distress. The lawsuit detailed every second of the invasion, supported by high-definition video and audio recordings. But Marcus didn't stop there. He contacted local news stations, civil rights organizations, and social media advocates. Within 48 hours, the story exploded. The video footage went viral. Millions watched Patricia barge into a black man's home, demand proof of ownership, and call the police on a homeowner celebrating his birthday. The optics were devastating. A wealthy white woman using her authority to terrorize a successful black man, all under the guise of community standards. The backlash was swift and brutal. Patricia's employer, a real estate firm, fired her within a week. The HOA demanded her resignation. Her social media profiles were flooded with condemnation. One board member issued a public apology. Another quietly moved out of the community. But Patricia doubled down. She hired a lawyer, claiming she'd acted within her rights as HOA president. She gave an interview to a sympathetic local outlet, painting herself as a victim of cancel culture and insisting she'd done nothing wrong. That interview was her biggest mistake. Marcus's legal team used her own words against her in court. They presented the footage alongside her contradictory statements. They brought in neighbors who testified about her pattern of targeting Marcus, the random inspections, the complaints about his guests, the comments about property values. The pattern was undeniable. This wasn't about HOA rules. It was about race. It was about power. It was about a white woman who couldn't accept a black man living in her neighborhood. The judge didn't need long to deliberate.
The ruling came down like thunder. Patricia Sullivan and her 3 accomplices were each ordered to pay Marcus Johnson $100,000 in damages, a total of $400,000. Additionally, the HOA itself was fined and forced to implement mandatory anti-discrimination training for all board members. But the money wasn't the victory. Not really. The victory was standing in that courtroom, watching Patricia's face drain of color as the judgment was read. The victory was knowing that every excuse, every justification, every attempt to twist the narrative had failed. The victory was the message sent to every HOA, every neighbor, every person who thought they could weaponize authority against someone who didn't belong. Marcus didn't celebrate. He donated a portion of the settlement to organizations fighting housing discrimination. He used his platform to advocate for stronger protections against racial profiling in residential communities. He gave interviews, sharing his story not for revenge, but for change. Because Marcus knew something that Patricia never understood. Owning a mansion doesn't make you immune to racism. Success doesn't shield you from suspicion. No amount of money or achievement can protect you when people see your skin color before they see your humanity. Patricia lost her job, her reputation, and $500,000. But Marcus lost something too, the illusion that he could ever truly escape being seen as other, that his dream home could ever just be home without the burden of proving he deserved to be there. And yet he stayed. He still lives in that stone mansion on Lake Vista. He still watches the sunrise over the water. He still hosts gatherings, though smaller now, more intimate, because leaving would have meant they won. The story isn't just about Marcus Johnson. It's about every black person who's been followed in a store, questioned in their own neighborhood, asked for proof of belonging. It's about the exhaustion of constantly justifying your existence. It's about the courage it takes to fight back when the system is designed to protect your accuser, not you. Patricia Sullivan thought she was protecting her community, but what she was really protecting was a legacy of exclusion, a comfort built on the idea that some people, no matter how successful, how qualified, how deserving, will never truly belong. She was wrong, and the courts proved it. So here's the question we're left with. How many Patricias are still out there? How many HOA boards, police calls, and concerned neighbors are wielding their power to keep people like Marcus out? And what will it take for that to finally end? If this story moved you, share it. Talk about it. Don't let it just be another viral moment that fades into the algorithm. Because Marcus's victory isn't just his, it's ours. And the fight isn't over. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep this conversation alive.